Hello, everyone. This is Terry Mitchell with the Voice on Fire, interviews with intentions. If you're new to my interviews, I love chatting with people that I find fascinating. They're our change agents, difference makers, action takers. They're the people that are on a mission to have an impact either locally or even perhaps around our global village. And my guest certainly fills that criteria. I'd love to welcome you today, Mary, to the Voice on Fire interviews. This is Mary Wong.
Hi, Terry. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Terry. It's a delight to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And to get our conversation rolling right off the bat, I love to ask right from the beginning what it is you do. So do share with our audience what it is that you do.
Oh, thanks, Terry. It's what I do is I help people have conversations. Now, that might sound a little bit like nothing too exciting, but what I've found is that when we have our conversations well, then we are able to create the change that we want to create, and we are able to engage and enthuse the people around us and inspire them to bigger and better things. It's really about leadership, I guess, but it is more focused on the sorts of words that we use, the way we use them, and the way we deliver them as well.
Mm-hmm. And you've got quite an extensive background. I was fascinated when I was reading through your bio. There's so many things that you are, I would say you've experienced, but you've also got expertise in. So where did this journey begin with discovering that conversations have so much power?
Actually, it began when I was a child. I was the youngest of six, and we lived on a farm, so there was plenty of space around us, and we could be as noisy as we wanted to be, and we were very noisy. And what I discovered as a small child was that if I wanted to be heard, I needed to be loud.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went to school and discovered that being loud didn't work so well in society. It was great when we were out on the farm and no one else was around us, but in society it really didn't work well. And there were a whole lot of different things that happened. I got terribly bullied as I grew up. At the age of 11, there's a boy that put some guns to my head and told me he was going to kill me if I didn't do a certain thing. I did that certain thing and then ran home absolutely terrified. His bullying came about from me being friends with his sister, and he didn't want me to be friends with his sister because I just wasn't popular. That was his side of the deal.
Wow.
And I reported that to my mum, and my mum reported it to the school principal, because this was the 70s, and back there you didn't call the police or anything like that. You just reported it to the principal, who then said to us, if this happened inside the house, it's a police matter. It's a quiet matter. If it happened outside the house, it's a police matter. Don't ask me what that distinction comes from. And it happened outside the house. And I had to go inside the house because he wanted me to find something. And I had to go inside the house to find this thing for him. And so he said, no, it was inside the house. She was inside my house. And he looked at me and said, well, you say it was outside. He says it was inside. Which one was it? And I said, well, he met me outside with the guns and told me I had to go inside. So I had to go inside, as you do. And he didn't believe me. He said, well, you're a liar. And so from there, as an 11-year-old, I was told that my voice didn't have power, my thoughts didn't have power, my words didn't have power.
Yep.
And I grew up from there having a lot of problems with having conversations with people because I was terrified of speaking my truth. I was terrified of saying what needed to be said. And I just didn't feel like I had any value because no one would listen to me or believe what I had to say.
Yep.
Then in my career, I became a nurse, which is what I had always wanted to be from when I was a small child. And nursing is a career where you need to be able to communicate.
Absolutely.
So we were taught some very basics of how to engage people when you're having conversations, how to support them. Things like there's a model called SOLAR. So sit straight on, have an open posture, lean in, develop eye contact, be relaxed, that sort of thing. So that we were taught that was basically our communication training. That was it. So off you go now. You're all nurses and you're all going to be able to communicate fantastically well. And so we did. We went off, and I didn't learn a great deal about communication in that space, but I did learn how to have conversations in difficult moments because we had a lot of people who had we're going through bad stuff.
Of course.
And because I have lots of empathy, I was blessed with empathy as an empath, as somebody who's very much attuned to other people's energies. I was blessed with a lot of empathy. So I was able to get through that space and be that supportive person in that space. Then I studied midwifery, which was a really interesting space to be in, because we were taught in midwifery how to have conversations with people about things like sex. How do you have this conversation when the wife's just given birth and the husband says, so when can we? You have to be able to comfortably answer that question and any other question that the lady who's just given birth is going to ask, and they ask plenty of them, and be very comfortable with those sorts of things. So I learned to be comfortable with the uncomfortable conversation. It didn't necessarily make me learn a whole lot more again about how to communicate deeply with people. So I went on. After I finished nursing, I actually went and I got married, which definitely taught me lots about communication. But I got married, and then we moved away, and I ended up doing pathology work for a couple of years. And whilst I was doing that, studied fashion, because it was an interest, something I just loved doing. And from studying fashion, started my own business. Now, there's a whole different world of communication that I had to learn. So it just kept building, one thing on top of another, on top of the other. And I feel like all roads eventually led to here, because after doing that and running my business for several years, I started having children. I was married for 14 years before I had children. My first one was 6 years before my second one. And on my 20th anniversary, I had a one-day-old baby.
Oh, wow.
Which was really fun. And then, and then from there, what happened then? Oh, yes, after that, I actually ended up with postnatal depression. And it was a combination of so many different things that created that. Partly not speaking up when I needed help, partly feeling like I had to be the one who did it all and was in charge of it all and was on top of it all, because I always was a perfectionist. Partly because I wasn't having the conversations that I needed to have with people around me and saying, you know what, I'm not feeling good. It was all this self-judgment, all this being unkind to myself that went on. And in that space, I ended up in a lot of trouble. I ended up at a point where I thought I couldn't stay on the planet any longer. And not only did I feel like I couldn't stay on the planet any longer, I felt like I was going to have to take my children with me. Now, that moment when I had that thought was the moment that turned it round for me, because in that space, I went, no way. That is not happening. There is no way I would ever hurt my children. And that was the moment that made me do what previously had been unthinkable, and go and tell someone what was actually going on for me, and be fully honest about what was happening for me on the inside. Now, it was a whole lot of different traumas that had happened over those years through not speaking out. I could talk about it for hours. I've written a couple of books about it. But there were a whole lot of traumas that went on in that space. So then there was a whole lot of healing that had to happen. And when that healing had happened, I went, I have to help other people. I can't sit in this space having been through what I've been through and allow somebody else to sit in that space without being able to get the help that they need. I never want to see somebody else go through the pain of feeling like they couldn't stay here any longer. When there's help, when there are things that you can do to change it. So then I studied counselling. And after I'd studied counselling, I studied business, because I thought, oh, well, even though I've run one already, I need to set up another one, and times have changed. I need to, get my mind around it. So I studied business. And then after I'd studied business, I ended up studying coaching by default. It was a leadership, mentoring and coaching. And I saw the leadership and the mentoring, and thought, yes, that's what I need. I didn't believe in coaches at the time, because when I had been in severe depression, I'd been told by coaches all I needed to do was change the way I was thinking and everything would be fine. When you are in severe depression, changing your thinking does not work, because you aren't actually capable of changing your thinking in that space. So I knew how wrong they were in that space, and I knew how dangerous that was. So I would never have studied coaching. But because I had progressed so far on my journey from where I had been when that coach had given me that information, I was able to go, when I did study the coaching, I was able to go, oh, wow, and put all these things in practice that I was learning. And wow, what a difference it made. My whole world changed In the meantime, I had another thing happen, which was a leukemia diagnosis. And even though I'd been through all of the work with the therapy and so forth to heal me, I had been, it was about 1.5 years of therapy, and I was still sitting there going, I'm not sure I want to be here. And when I got that leukemia diagnosis, I had this moment where I went, hell yeah, I want to be here.
Yeah.
I want to go. I want to be here. I have a reason to be here. I want to make this count. And that was the moment that really turned it around. That was that moment where it was like a switch flicked inside me. And I went, no, I'm back. I turned back on, and that's when I started all my study and really moved forward. Then from having done all of that, I've continued to study. I mean, study for me is a lifelong thing. I never stop learning. I've got a whole lot of different certifications and things that I've put in place to help me help others, but also to help me understand how others tick. And it's that understanding and that being able to use the tools that I'm certified in to help other people understand how other people tick as well, so that they can truly engage. Because once we get those conversations in place, once we really understand who we're talking to, we can put those conversations in place that get through. When we don't understand the people that we're talking to, and we don't have any idea of how they function or how their mind functions, there's a barrier. There's like this brick wall between us. So we have to understand what brick to take off first, how to get through that, so that we can talk to them in a way that they understand. Not only that, so that's the first thing, that's the start of the process. But not only that, we then have to understand how to build trust with them and how to get them to a space where we can have the conversations that we need to have to really make the difference. It's not that first conversation. The first conversation is very gentle. The first conversation is very low level. Start off, we call it a level 1 conversation. We want to get up to a level 3 conversation. And the tool that I'm using when I talk about level 3 conversations is conversational intelligence, which is another one of my certifications.
Wow.
Story.
No, look, I appreciate, thank you for sharing such a personal journey that you've been on. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners, anyone that has gone through any sort of trauma or difficulty, but particularly been through something similar to what you've experienced, will completely understand in their own way what it feels like to want to check out and then realize, no, that's not, there's something within that is calling you to really to show up, be you. And you said so many things that I echoed. You probably saw me vigorously nodding my head. There's a lot that you were saying that echoed throughout experiences I've had, especially as the child growing up and having to be loud to be heard. I was notoriously loud, and again, same thing, showed up at school and it was not the done thing, and I got bullied a lot in school as well. So a lot of those things, I'm just seeing so much of that reflected in some of my own journey. And I think it's really important, something you mentioned there about children and how they suddenly become almost, they absorb and embody what they learn about themselves and about their place in the world. And that carries through, because it's so deeply embedded, it becomes suppressed in such a way that they don't know, because it's such a hugely, not just intellectual, but an intelligent process that is beyond their mind at the time. They can't process it. They're not in at that level of development to be able to. So it really does linger and haunt for such a long time until there's reason or ways to tap into that as a more mature adult. And seriously, it makes me wonder how many people are wandering around on our planet still carrying horrendous traumas and feeling invalidated and feeling like they just don't have the right to speak up and be heard. So the idea of a conversation that can take us from some difficult place where we don't feel our voice is warranted to a point where we can have those really, as you say, uncomfortable conversations, that's such an important process, an important phase that we really must pass through. And I commend you for wanting to do that and for being so committed to bringing that to people. Is there a particular audience that you take this to? Because the next question I'd love to ask is, who do you do this for?
I do this for people in corporate. I do this for people in everyday life, because I don't believe in discriminating. If somebody has a problem with using their voice, with saying what they need to say, then they need help. And I don't believe in discriminating between. I know that all the marketers will tell you, you've got to aim it at somebody because it is a business, clearly. But the thing is that, for me, this is a passion project. It's not just a bring in money. For me, this is, if somebody's in need and I have the tools to help them, I want to be able to help them. So some of my clients, I have international clients. Some of them, there's a whole not-for-profit organisation in Kenya that I work with who do amazing, amazing work, and they are under super stress and pressure and dealing with some really difficult situations. So I work with that team. I help them communicate within the team. I help them around different sort of management and leadership issues that come up. We work around all those sorts of things, and we have the conversations that we need to have to make it come right. And I empower them with the words and the conversations that they need to have to make it right. Here in Australia, I also have clients who are professionals who've stepped up into management roles and suddenly found they're not getting on with the team because they don't really know how to have that management conversation and feel comfortable with it. I have clients who are working and in peer meetings, in group meetings with heads of other departments and things, where they've been attacked in those meetings and they don't know how to respond to that attack in a way that calms the attack and turns the difficulty, the issue that's happening with the attack, into something really amazing as an opportunity to co-create something totally different. So I work with them as well. And I work with everyday people who are struggling to have the conversations they need to have, whether it's talking to their boss for a pay rise, whether it's sorting out an issue with, there was one who was going through a divorce, and she was trying to get things sorted and she couldn't get them to sort out the issue. They'd actually, the other party had completely stopped listening and weren't even responding, and she was on a deadline and she was like, I need to get this sorted because this is happening and I need it sorted before that happens. And I was able to go in with a simple conversation that just turned that whole thing over, and it all got sorted in no time. So sometimes it's a one-off. Sometimes it's just people coming and saying, look, I just don't know how to say this to someone. Other times it's a series and a load of lessons, one after the other that we work through. It's coaching and mentoring. It's not coaching by itself, because if you don't know something, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And if you don't know what you don't know, it's not going to come to you if I ask you. But if you did know, what would it be? Doesn't always work. So it is a combination of both that I do to help people with that.
Fantastic. And it's amazing you're mentioning that you have activities that you participate in across in places like Kenya. And probably, because we know each other through social media, you're probably aware that I have quite a bit to do with a lot of the communities in Africa. And I find that it is just so, it's so, I can't say that there's one word that describes the feeling that I get when I think about it, but it's quite heartfelt. It's quite an emotional experience to be engaged with them, because they are so dedicated to making change possible. And sometimes they just want that little bit of support, and to know that because we're so filled with resources and we've got so many resources that we can tap into, we can just simply reach out and have a conversation with them, and it can be all the difference. So have you found anything like that in terms of the experiences you've had and the way that you're bringing this to the global village? Have you found that there's been any particular story that has really demonstrated the importance of what you do?
Well, the Kenyan team, for example, I did a lot of work with the leader who was the founder of that group around his story and around the way that he was sharing his story. Because when he was first sharing his story, he was missing some really vital parts and putting emphasis on some parts that actually pulled people away from him. One of the things that he talked about quite often was the men would go out and get drunk. And so when he shared that the men would go and get drunk, you could actually see the audience go, oh, they're going out and getting drunk. That's what they're going to do with any money that I give them. You could almost hear the thoughts going through their heads. But what he was trying to get across was, because the men had no hope, they would make this very cheap, nasty alcohol and
Yes.
drink
Yep.
it and just wipe themselves out on alcohol. And then
Yep.
they'd come home and beat up the wives.
Yep.
And one of the things that they were achieving through their work was that the wives were able to bring in some money. Then the men would
Yep.
see that that was happening, because the reason they would beat up their wives was because they'd come home and there'd be no food on the table.
Yep. Yep.
And there was no food on the table because they didn't have jobs.
Yep.
So that was their own inadequacy that was causing it. So we just changed the way that he shared what was going on for them. And it totally changed the level of investment people were making, who were donating towards his cause. And it's such a small thing. No, but he's got nearly twice as many people now that he's supporting as compared to what he was supporting before, because of and it is in triple figures. So it's not in small, it's not 2 or 4 people or 2 to 4 people. It is a very large number that he supports. And that has come about through being able to fundraise more effectively for his not-for-profit, simply through the way that he used his words when he told people about what they do and how they achieve it, and what the effects of it are. It's amazing how much difference that can make. There's another one of the local people that I've worked with, who was one that was really struggling in having been promoted into management, was thinking about, maybe I just throw it all in and go somewhere else and do something else, and go back down to a lower job somewhere else. And instead now she has actually left that job now, but she left that job for a much higher level position that she was able to take on, because she was so much more comfortable with what she's doing, in the way that she has her conversations and the way that she leads her team. And it just made a huge difference. There's every conversation, every time we sit and work on it, people come in and they're like, the shoulders are down. Oh, I just can't do this. It's not working. It's, you know that you can see it, the body language is like this. And they walk out like, oh,
I know.
I've got this. And when you see those shoulders go up and you see their back straighten and you see their face light up, and you go, I know I'm doing the right thing by these people. I know what I'm doing is worthwhile. And it is not, they go out and it doesn't just affect them. It affects the people around them, and then the people around them, and then the ripple effect is enormous. So it's just, what can I say? It's just amazing. It's just amazing to be able to do that, and to know that at one point I was like them as well, and to and to know, to recognize that difference in me, where I came from and where I am now, and how I feel now in comparison. To know that obviously every journey is different, every person's different, every issue is different, but I know that sense of worthlessness to the sense of worth, to be able to achieve that difference is so huge for any person in life, and to know that journey intimately myself makes it even more impactful for me. And
totally
makes me even more engaged in what I do.
Fantastic.
And committed to it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with what you're saying there, and I kind of echo my sentiments again, in the sense that very few people would know anything about me historically. Obviously, we both grew up in the time before social media, so there's not a lot of my history splattered all over. Not a bad thing. No, not at all. There are some times I was super glad there wasn't any social media around to create any sort of embarrassing moments that I may have to live through today. But that said, I know that anybody, I share in one of the books that I've written, that I myself was just so overcome with social anxiety subsequent to all the bullying and the put downs and the keep quiets and all that, that I didn't know how to, it's not that I couldn't do the action to catch a bus, but the thought of doing it, I was crippled with social anxiety, to the point where when I saw the bus coming to the bus stop, when I was finally challenged to actually go and catch that bus, and I was only living in rural Victoria at the time, or regional Victoria, the bus was coming and I was standing at the bus stop and my knees nearly buckled out from under me and I was sweating and I was like, I can't do this, I can't do this. So that rhetoric of I can't was running around in my head, because I was so terrified of just being rejected again because someone would laugh at me or, ridicule me in some way. So I've gone from being that person to being somebody who comfortably sits here now today, being able to host interviews with people around the world. And the thing that I take away from that, from the whole conversational point that you've been talking about, is it's so important to recognize that where we are in ourselves at some point in time doesn't have to be where we stay. With the right guidance, the right support, and the right tools around us, we can become so much more. We don't have to remain stuck, and we don't have to be, I suppose, a prisoner within our own minds if we get that support. And we don't need to worry about making mistakes and how that's going to impact anybody around us, because mistakes are part of the life journey. And when you are supported, sometimes the mistakes are fun because you realize, oh, crap, I just made a mistake. And then you get to learn from that experience. And you can sometimes poke fun at yourself as well for all the gaffes and the mess ups. And I know that the one thing that's important is recognizing that the personal growth process does involve being able to have hard conversations, difficult conversations, and conversations that are not very easy to have. Not all conversations are enjoyable and fun and, full of giggles and light laughs. Sometimes we have to have difficult conversations. How do you go about that process of recognizing the steps you need to take with somebody? What's the indication to you that somebody is at a point where they're not even able to have a level 1 conversation? How do you take them through the process?
Well, yeah, it really does depend on the person. My coaching, my work that I do is very much, it's a one-on-one, and it is tailored to the individual. So there are a whole different lot of ways that I will work, but basically for every client that comes in, it's a matter of prioritizing what's the biggest issue that we need to sort first. Now, it might be working on mindset.
Of course.
And if they are in a state of severe anxiety, and when I say mindset, that I'm not talking just coaching tools. The reason I say that is that some people have this idea that mindset is just, oh yes, you're just going to change your state and bang, you'll be a different person.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. If you have a severe traumatic background, you have to be able to work through the stages of working through that trauma. Totally. Now, if it is someone who has got a lot of severe trauma, it might be a CTPSD or something like that, I would be referring them, because I'm not a CTPSD specialist. Yep. So I would be referring that person to get the help that they need, so that we can then progress once they're past that point of trauma through moving forward. And I believe in responsible care. I believe in doing what's best for my clients. I definitely 100% am a do no harm sort of girl. There are a lot of people out there who aren't. So for me, it's most important that my client comes first, and what their needs are comes first. So I'll prioritize. Yep. There are tools that we can use. If it is simply a matter of, I don't know how to have the conversation, we'll talk about, like, why don't you know, what sorts of things don't you know, what area. There's a lot of clarifying that goes on in the questioning that I do, making sure that I'm actually treating what it is they're asking me for. Because when we have conversations, we often make assumptions. So someone can come in and say, like, for example, for you, I can't catch the bus. Now, people, if you can't catch the bus, people are going to assume that means you just don't know how to pay for a ticket and get on the bus, right?
Exactly.
Or which bus to catch. That would be the first assumption. But as you said, that wasn't the issue.
No, not at all.
So first off is getting rid of assumptions and making sure that we've clarified exactly where it is and what the truth of the matter is, and so that we're working on truth, not on story, so on facts. And it's hard, because when I use the word truth, one person's truth can be different to another person's truth in the situation. So we have to be a little bit careful there too, because there's perceptions of what's going on around us. It's very convoluted, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So many layers.
Yeah, and even the concept of truth can be quite distressing to people, because truth can actually be quite a confronting word. And sometimes, as my experience has been with working with people, is you've really got to slowly peel those layers away to help them understand that there's this truth, but what's below that truth, and what's below that, and what's below that, where you can actually safely take somebody to that place where it is okay to really reveal the fact of their truth. And it is their truth, as you say. It's something that they personally own, and it's just helping them to get there.
Absolutely. And that is part of it. And in fact, when I'm working with a client, I often I would not use normally the term the truth, because when you're working with a client and you're wanting them to peel that onion, and if you say to them, what is the truth here, they can make an assumption from that you think they're lying. And that'll immediately turn them off and shut the gate. So when we have to be very careful of the words that we use. Truth is one, trust is another. I had a client who used the terminology, I don't trust you to do X, Y, Z one day in a conversation. And what she was actually saying was, you don't know the information behind this, so how can I expect you to do X, Y, Z? But because she used the word trust, that immediately turned the person off in the other side of the conversation. So we have to be very careful of the little words that we use. And certainly when I'm talking with a client, I'm very, very careful about those words. So we continue to peel back and we find out exactly what's going on for them. We find out the facts of the situation. And there's things like sometimes that's coaching around, all right, what is it that your thinking is around what that person was saying? Well, what if that wasn't right? What if they were thinking something different? What else could they be thinking? And then to get them, and then what else could be going on for them that would make them say what they said? What else? Because what other things are in, and looking at all the different bits and pieces that go on around, not just those few words that were said.
Absolutely.
So that there's a greater understanding of both sides. And then from there working through, okay, so how would you like to deal with this? Do you want to have a face-to-face conversation already, or do you want to work on repairing the relationship first, or do you let's look at, because most people, if there's a two-person conversation and I don't know either of those people, this person knows this person a lot better than I do. Right? So if I'm going to say to them, oh, I think you should do X, Y, Z, and they know that this person is no way that person's going to respond to X, Y, Z, then why would they do it? That's poor advice, right? So for me, it would be more about, all right, what sorts of things do they usually respond to? And what other options might there be for getting them to respond? And then from those options, what do you think would be the best option to work with? So it is a coaching situation in there. And then when they go, oh, look, I really think we need to sit down over a cup of coffee in a public place and talk about why I'm so upset. Then that's when I go into, right, well, there's a formula for that conversation. And here's the formula for that conversation. So you're going to make sure that you start off with facts. Do not go in there with, I think you're doing X, Y, Z. What you come back with is, I saw you cross the street with this person yesterday. When you came home, you said that you haven't spoken to that person. Right? Those are the facts, because that's what they said. That's exactly what happened, right? And then what the story is. That makes me think that you're lying to me or you're hiding something. All right. So that's the story. And then the question, and the question being an open question. Can you help me understand what's actually going on here? Which is the question to that person. And when that person comes back and answers you, you use the same formula again and again and again until you get to the bottom of that. Now, it's not just about the conversation. It's also about the way we use our emotional intelligence to within that conversation. So we're not just reacting and jumping down each other's throats. We need a certain amount of self-awareness. We need awareness of others. We need awareness of when our emotions are getting high and how to deal with that. And sometimes that might be, look, I'm really sorry. I'm just going to have to take a couple of moments. I can feel myself getting upset. Can I just take a moment? It's really important to us that we sort this out. But let's both just take a breather for a minute, go for a walk, go and order a coffee or whatever, and come back and sit down again and come back into this when we've both calmed down a bit. Is that okay? And in most cases, the other person will go, yeah, they're pretty glad of a break too, They might not have been in the space where they could call it to a break because they didn't know how to handle that. So when you've got all of those sorts of things in place where you can follow a formula, where you can know what to do when things are starting to get hairy in that conversation, so that you have ways of navigating that storm, then you are, I don't want to say forearmed because it's not a battle, but you're forewarned. You've got an idea of what to do. So you're not just lost at sea when things go wrong. You know what to do. And that makes a big difference to your confidence in sorting out those issues and going forward from there. And it's something that's, I use that formula so often, and it's something that is just so powerful. People get incredible results from that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in our own emotional situations that we're not able to see the forest for the trees. And I guess that's why we often find whether we go to a coach or a mentor or a guide or somebody that we respect who can give us appropriate advice and really help, the most help comes from someone helping us to unpick our own thoughts and feelings. But I also find it's really valuable if we can understand the value of emotional control. I, for one, have lost lots of emotional control in very heated conversations. And over the years, I'm sure I have behaved incredibly poorly. But I understand.
I still do sometimes.
And
I'm human.
Absolutely. I was about to say that. I'm only human. I know that I make mistakes, and that is part of the journey. As I was mentioning before, we do make mistakes. We're going to get it wrong. We cannot have, unicorns and roses everywhere in our world. We've got to accept that sometimes there are thorns, and we are going to make mistakes, and we're going to say things that will be either perceived as hurtful, or we might intentionally want to hurt somebody, or vice versa, somebody's done that in regards to us. We have to navigate this world, and I think what I've been gaining from what you've been talking about is, imagine a world if we were able to feel confident in our communication skills such that we weren't just conversationally skilled, but emotionally skilled, so that we're able to know when to press the buttons and go, no, it's okay if I get a little bit irate right in this moment, but I can control that as long as I understand this is why. And I think if we're peeling away those layers and express ourselves confidently with our emotions in a degree of not necessarily control. I don't like the word control. I understand its context in many ways, but I tend to find that we feel like we've got to be controlled all the time. And I sometimes think
moderation rather than control. If we can be moderate in the way that we do those things and do them.
Great word.
There are times in life where getting angry is the only thing that serves you.
Totally.
And
Absolutely.
I'm not saying don't ever get angry. I mean, we all feel anger. We all get angry from time to time. It's the way that we express that anger, whether that's going to be constructive or destructive. And it's finding the correct approach for that moment, in that moment, so that we can navigate forward in a way that gets us where we need to get without collateral damage.
Absolutely. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, collateral damage is a perfect way of saying it. It's without, well, if all of our conversations are geared towards not necessarily a win-win, because not always will there be a win, but if there's less collateral damage, or indeed none, where we can come away with knowing that we've spoken our truth, we've been honest with ourselves and with the other people around us, and we've communicated what's true to us, and we know that we haven't intentionally or set out in any way, shape or form to hurt another person, but we've reached clarity with the point that we're at. Imagine the world. I mean, imagine the world. Imagine the things that would not be taking place in the world right now if only we were able to have these intelligent conversations. I live for the day, and I think what you're doing makes a massive contribution towards that. And I'd love to round out our conversation by, we've sort of covered some of this, but just to go a little deeper into it. Why do you do it, Mary? What's your motivation? You have spoken a little bit about it, but let's perhaps dig a little bit deeper there.
I have children.
Okay.
That might sound very glib, but I have children. I have a vested interest in a better world.
Yeah.
And I watch the things that go on in our world. I watch things that go on in our world, like invasions. I watch things that go on, like shooting of people around people because they're upset with something. I watch, some horrible things happen in this world. And when I look at them, I go, and I look at what's happened, and I go, what was going on for that person? So because I'm a bit strange. When I see somebody who goes out and shoots up a place, I don't just feel sorry for the people who've been shot up. I also feel sorry for the shooter, because something has taken that person to that place. Something has gone horribly wrong for that person to get that place. And I think that I have that understanding because I myself was at a position where I was seriously contemplating not just hurting, but killing people that I absolutely love more than life. And to understand that regardless how caring and loving and kind a person can be, they can go completely wrong in their thoughts sometimes, and people sometimes act on those thoughts. So when somebody does something really unthinkable, there's a reason that they've gotten to that point. Every one of us is here on a journey, and every one of us is here doing the best we can at any given moment with what we have in that moment. And that person that goes out and does a horrible thing obviously doesn't have much left in that moment when they go out and do that horrible thing.
Yeah.
So I always look at those situations and think to myself, that could have been prevented.
Yes.
That could have been prevented. And when we as humans get together and work together for the good of all mankind, when we combine our thoughts and our energies towards good, and this is what we can do when we have our conversations to a point where we work together, we get to bounce our ideas off each other. One person by themselves can create this. 5 people together can create this.
Yeah,
it's so much bigger. It's got so much more potential. And I look at where we are now in history and society, and I look at the things that are going on, and I think, you know, I have children, and those children will have children. And it's not just me that has children and grandchildren potentially. It's every other person on the planet who has children and or grandchildren and or nieces, nephews, cousins, whatever. We're all part of this. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
So for me, it is about a better world tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
perfect.
Tomorrow's after that.
Yeah.
It's about moving society forward in a way that builds us up rather than destroys us.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I totally hear those sentiments. And it was interesting as you were sharing that. One of the things that occurred to me, and it's a thought that I've known for a very long time, is, and just as a slight segue, my background in relating to where you were sharing your earlier story about your history and what you've done, my background was actually in psychiatric nursing, and there was a reason why I went into that particular field. But one of the things I discovered about that is that I became interested in not so much the law, but I tended to watch a few of those law-based programs, and always about the guilty parties, and then you see the people in the courtroom systems, and the actors are saying, "Oh, but that person would never do that." And the one thing that I know 100% about absolutely every human being walking this planet, we all have the capacity to either hurt or maim another person. Every single one of us has that within us. And I've witnessed it. So I know that even someone that we would never suspect as even having the slightest wrinkle in their makeup absolutely has the capacity to do untold harm to another person or persons. It is within us. There's just that the way that we've been brought up, and the experiences that we've had, and the degrees to which we've been taught how to manage our emotions, live through the emotions, experience who we are, all of the different multi-layers experiences about being human have taken us on a journey away from confronting that, or being confronted with that, as you say, that moment in time where they've just, that's the end of the road and there's no other choice. It's such a complex situation. It is never an easy situation, and many of the things that you've shared certainly show that conversations can be the place where it can all start to help a person to reach a point where, even if they are at that darkest place, a conversation can bring somebody back from the worst position in themselves so that they feel connected again. Because I think one of the biggest things we have going on in the world at the moment is a really strong sense of disconnection, and we're not connecting anymore, and say anymore, because I don't know that we ever did in the level that is so important. And I think from just this conversation about conversations, it strikes me that sometimes, and I was guilty of it because I was brought up in an environment that, both school and home and all of that, where you listen so that you can respond rather than listening to hear what someone's saying. And that's an incredibly difficult habit to break. And you've really got to learn how to do that and focus on that. And I find with everything that you've spoken about, I see myself just in my own mind, I'm nodding along thinking, yes, totally. It's that experience that particularly having been a psychiatric nurse, it's so hard to just sit back and point the finger of blame and go, oh, that's the bad person. That bad person did the bad thing. There are, to a degree, evil people walking the planet, without a doubt, and they only probably take up 0.5% of the human population, and they may or may not.
I think 0.05 maybe, or even less.
Yeah, and they're the people that just perhaps for all intents and purposes, no matter how many times people like yourself or I might want to help them, they are beyond help. There is something notoriously wrong within their brain structure that just cannot be amended. And that is extremely tragic and terrible because it has awful ramifications. But there are the people who, like yourself, go to the point where I want to harm somebody because my life is not worth living. That is just the deepest tragedy for people who have got so much to give. So it's lovely to hear that in your story, you've learned so much about what's possible to bring about change from even the darkest place to really help people to really rise up and become somebody so much more. I think it's been a fascinating conversation that we've had, and I'm just interested to know if there was one thing that you could change about the world, what would that one thing be?
That's a great question. I think it would be to help people be more connected. It would be to get people to take the time out to be fully present when they're together with people. You know, we're so caught up in so much else that's going on. You know, we're caught up with, oh, I've got to get this done. I've got to be there. I've got to do that. Oh, let me flick on through Facebook. Let me have a look at this. Oh, let me, you know, and you're in a conversation with someone, but at the same time, you're doing all these things. And I think that being mindful of every moment, of every situation, of where you are, with whom, and of what's going on for them and for you, and how between the two of you, you can really create something special and mesh together simply through using your words and being there 100%, being prepared to adapt and make the changes that are needed. I think for me, that would be the biggest thing that I would change is the way that we get so distracted that we're not paying attention.
Yeah, totally. And it's like you said, one person can make a difference, and 5 people, when meshed together, to use your words, when meshed together, imagine the strength and the capacity to make amazing positive change in the world.
It's huge. And it's exciting. It's exciting, it's invigorating, and it's, you know, gives you so much hope to know that if we can get this work out there, if we can get this work to more and more and more people, and with every person that I help, that I teach in how this works, then goes out and helps and teaches people, it gets out faster as well. So that's, and I'm not the only person doing this work. There's a lot of people doing work like this, and like you say, your work is very similar. And you know, I think that's you did ask me for one thing that I'd change. There's 2. The other one is that stop competing with each other. And we start supporting each other. Because honestly, there is enough of this work for everybody. We don't need to be knocking each other down or pretending that we're better than the next person. None of us is better. We're all just different. And someone might be a better fit, but that doesn't make us a better person. It's
totally
a different situation. So I think that is the other thing, is like, let's stop competing and start supporting each other and make sure that we are lifting each other up in all that we do, so that we can go further and do more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an amazing conversation. Where, if people wanted to look for you, where could they find you? And just to note here that in the description below, both the YouTube video and also the podcast, there will be the details on how to contact Mary. But how can they find you online, Mary?
Well, on the website is probably the simplest one, which is www.optimalcoaching.com.au. Or if they go into Facebook, they can look me up in Facebook or look up Optimal Life. Helps if I can say my own business name, doesn't it? Optimal Life Solutions. If they look that up, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, I'm online, I'm on LinkedIn, a whole lot of different places. And jump in and say hi, have a conversation with me. I'm always happy to have a chat. Quite often you'll see me in the groups, on the various Facebook groups. You'll see me in a lot of different Facebook groups, and I often say in there, just reach out, have a chat. I'm happy to have a 5-minute or a 15-minute chat if there's something that you're struggling with, and there's no obligation around that. You know, like sometimes we just need to have a 5-minute chat with somebody and it sorts something out completely. Why would I charge someone for that?
Yeah.
You know, that's simple stuff. That's life. And that's, for me, that's giving back.
Yes,
so I'm always happy to do the short chat. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to work with me, that's fine. We can talk about that too. But, you know, if you just need a 5-minute conversation, I'm happy to do that. Because what I'm about is conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really, really lovely to know that we do need to know that across the world there are people that are willing to put their hand up and say, hey, if you need someone to chat with, whatever's going on, that's what we're here for. And I also like to finish out this by saying, if any of this discussion has triggered anything for you, please don't go through it alone. Please reach out either to myself or Mary, whichever way feels more comfortable for you, but do not go through whatever trauma or difficulty or awkward conversation or situation that's going on. Don't go through it alone. If it's putting you in a difficult situation, please reach out. It's important that you do. That's what we are here for. And I would like to say thank you so much, Mary. It has been a wonderful conversation. And I'm just so happy to be able to share this with my audience.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You're watching or listening to Voice on Fire Interviews with Intention. If you're new to Voice on Fire interviews, you'll hear from everyday amazing people on a mission to make a difference. These people are change agents, action takers, and difference makers, having a positive impact on their local community or across our global village. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell for updates on new interviews. I hope you enjoy.